Welcome to tonight's event. Let me say a few words about Science and Cocktails. Science and Cocktails is an initiative organized by Niels Bohr Institute and Doensloes, and its objective is to bring science closer to people in a non-serious environment. We run a session every second week, but the next session on the 7th of June will be the last one. Then we'll do a break and we'll restart in September with more interesting topics. Tonight we have a very special guest. It was brought all the way from Pennsylvania to Christiania by Christiania due to its unusual his unusual idea. So Walter Tengelsen was a former NASA project leader. He was the project leader for different interplanetary missions, and besides that he has worked on many other projects developing cities, different, you can say in some sense activist ideas, and so far he has developed also his own ideas of how science should work, how the education system should work, what is wrong about the way we do science today. And he wants to show this by making a big media production here in Christiania, using Christiania environment and morphing it into a virtual science city to show how science should be done in the right way.
Thank you, Jay, and a very, very warm welcome to you all and for coming here. I really can't find the words in any language to express how happy I am to be here to address the residents of Christiania and Copenhagen about this particular project, because I think it fits in so well here. So let me add a warm welcome to meine Damen und Herren, to oh my gosh, I can't even read my own writing. Damen und Herren, the ladies of Mesdames et Messieurs in France, ladies and gentlemen in England, and if there's anybody here from the US, guys and dolls. So, my background, let me tell you a little bit about my background that led to this, and maybe I better stay away from the microphone. I was a product of Scandinavian grandparents. All my grandparents came to the US in the 1870s or so. 2 from Denmark, 1 from Norway, and 1 I think from Sweden. So we're trying to, I'm trying to claim I'm at least half Danish. And if there's any Finnish blood in the family, nobody seems to talk about that. So I don't know how that's going to work out. We also had a question of whether to have a translator for this, but I was told that you all had studied English. We're a little bit too high here. Okay. I was informed that you all had studied English and were very proficient in English. The problem is that I speak American. So I could compensate for that by trying to speak American in a Danish accent. But I don't know if that's going to work too either, so let me just try my best here. Now, as a child, I got into this whole space thing. Boy, I can't even read my own writing anymore. As a child, I was born in New York City, as I say, a Scandinavian family, and I had a rather enriched environment at that time. In the city, used to be taken over to the museums and to the Hayden Planetarium and had all kinds of wonderful things going on. But from an early age, I was always very interested. I was really crazy about aeroplanes. And I just wanted to show you one thing that I did, which indicates something by, let's slide this over a little bit, okay? Whoop, 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 whoop. But hopefully this is enough. Let me just show you something. At the age of 7, I remember this distinctly at the age of 7, there was a new plane that had just been produced in the US called the Piper Cub, a very standard, reliable aircraft. And I distinctly remember making a drawing of the Piper Cub. And it was a very, crude thing. Well, I'm going the wrong way here. Oh, I'll go this way. And drop down, and the propeller and so forth. And I was a much better artist in those days. But I drew this thing with the landing here and so forth, and the wing and the windows. And it was a much better drawing then than I do now. But I wrote underneath, "1,000 miles an hour." Where I got that, I'll never know or remember. But I will never forget the look on my mother's face and my aunt's face. We were at my aunt's apartment at that time. And the two of them were sitting in the kitchen having a cup of coffee. And I'll never forget the look of shock on their face when they saw me saying 1,000 miles an hour. But I thought, oh, okay, so planes don't fly 1,000 miles an hour. But just 8 years later, Shep Yeager broke the sound barrier in the Bell X-1, and we were off and running towards 1,000 miles an hour and faster. So this is the kind of thing that many people, some people, live in the past. Many people just live in the present. I always seem to be living in the future, always thinking of better things to come and better possibilities. So this greatly influenced my career and my choice of career, and being so nuts about airplanes, I decided to become an aeronautical engineer, but then shifted over to electronics so that I would have a broader capacity for systems work. I, of course, was also very, very interested in space, the space program, or space in terms of Buck Rogers and comic strips, and not knowing when that was ever going to actually happen. Well, when I got out of college, I went to work at a company in Los Angeles that made inertial navigation systems. They were one of the 3 leaders in inertial systems. Very, very complicated hardware and so forth. But as they used to like to say, an inertial guidance system is like a baby. Very easy to conceive and very difficult to deliver. But this was a great experience because it gave me, I was working on aircraft and a few missiles, I would have to admit. And then when the space program, that grand day in 57 and 58 when the space program started, I shifted into the space program. That led me to then come back later, shortly after that, to the New York area. And I wound up with a company briefly there and then transferred back to the Grumman Company, where I had worked summers when I was in college. And the Grumman people, I went there because they were talking about they had just got a contract for a NASA satellite, the Orbiting Astronomical Observatory, the OAO, which was a huge vehicle. Oh, it was an 8-sided vehicle with a 30-inch diameter, 75 or so centimeter hole down the middle. The whole thing was about 9-10 feet tall, and they had huge solar panel arrays on both sides, sitting over an angle. And this was the first astronomical observatory that was put up, and the vehicle functioned very well. The vehicle performed beautifully, which is great credit to the Grumman people. But the state of the technology of taking an optical image and converting it into an electronic signal to be sent down was very weak, very poor at that time. So we never got any great pictures from the OAO. But it had worked in orbit, it was stayed in orbit for over a year. Now, the first thing that prior to that, I'm jumping ahead here, prior to that, when I transferred back to Grumman, I was expecting to work on the OAO, and they said, oh no, you have had manned guidance experience from one of the other companies, and we would like you on our proposal for the lunar lander. They were going to go after, Grumman was going to go after the lunar lander. So in 61 and early 62, I was responsible for electronic systems integration on what became the winning proposal for the lunar lander, the lunar module of the Apollo program. But there was little for me to do on that because the NASA people had given the electronics to some other companies that had been ahead of us, and they had the electronics for the command and service module, so they gave them the whole package to make it integrated. So I became overall project engineer for interplanetary missions, which was my real long-term desire, and came up with what I thought was a fabulous idea. The OAO vehicle had already worked very reliably in Earth orbit and worked for over a year. So I said, why don't we modify it? Modify the vehicle and put it in orbit about Mars. Now, at that time, our knowledge of Mars was pretty skimpy. We still thought there were canals on Mars. This is taken from astronomers. The picture is taken from astronomers' representations of what they thought they saw through the telescope. But I said, we can put this vehicle without the solar panels. You wouldn't want solar panels out by Mars. There's not enough sunlight. But we can put that out there. Here's the last stage booster rocket drifting away, and then we release a small lander to find out. But we could get a tremendous amount of information out of this by orbiting the planet, mapping it, surveying it, mapping it, and then putting a probe down to actually test the atmosphere. And I thought my future was secure on this because I was able to use the upper stage. This required, this one vehicle required the Saturn V booster, the same one that was sent the men to the moon. But I could use the upper stage of the third booster stage, to have a fixed 24-3-foot diameter antenna. And the NASA people were really crazy about that idea because at that moment they were having such great trouble unfurling an antenna. They're having one open up and then pop out and then unfurl to form a parabola. It wasn't working. So for them, a fixed antenna was just absolute paradise. They really loved the idea. I thought we were really headed for success on this. Suddenly, President Johnson, decided to cancel the Saturn V booster so that they could have more money to send to Vietnam for the Vietnam War. End of program, end of career. That's the way these things used to go in aerospace. Now, at that time, there were many of us, many engineers and scientists too, who were walking around saying, this is 1967, 2 years before the landing, saying, well, if we can land a man on the moon, why can't we clean up the garbage, make the trains run on time, fix up the city, da-da-da-da-da-da. Whole list of huge problems that the cities needed to do. They were degrading. They were going down fast, and they felt there were a lot of things that could be done to make the cities better. Now, cities became a point of focus of mine, especially since I was born in New York City. And I started to look at various things that could be done, and then ran into the UN group that was planning a UN conference on habitat or the cities. UN, as you remember, had a conference in 1972 on the environment in Stockholm. And then they started planning in 74 for the cities conference, which was going to be held in Vancouver in 76. And I was invited to attend the technical experts week of discussion, which is a fascinating time with people like Buckminster Fuller and Fritz Schumacher